Welcome to the Write Project podcast, where we discuss writing, publishing, and everything books. I am your host, Matthew LeDrew, author of the Xander Drew series and Infinity novels, and partner at Engine Books. I have with me my co-hosts, author Amanda Labonté, and fellow author and publisher Ellen Curtis. On today's episode, we're going to be discussing NaNoWriMo 2017 and the state of traditional publishing in Newfoundland. But first, we'll be talking about Ernest Cline's novel, Ready Player One. This week, I read a novel that's been very popular lately, or the last year to 2 years. I don't know when it came out. I'll put it up when it came out. But I'll put the stats up. The stats will be on the screen right now for the novel. I wanted to know what you thought of it, and just in the trend in general, if you've read it, and if not, I'll explain it to you. But it's Ready Player One. Have you read Ready Player One?
I started to read it and could not force myself to continue.
Wow, okay.
But
we had different opinions.
Yeah, and I hear that a lot of people have an opposite opinion to mine. It might have been because I was listening to the audiobook, and perhaps I just didn't like whoever was reading the audiobook. But I felt like I couldn't sympathize with the character, though.
Will Wheaton read the audiobook.
Okay, well...
He is hard to sympathize.
Are you throwing shade at Will Wheaton? Do you know what's on the screen right now?
I feel like...
The picture of Will Wheaton getting stabbed through the chest from TNG.
I feel like a lot of people don't mind that.
Yeah. Did you know, funny point, he didn't, because there was no internet back then, when he was a kid on that show, he didn't realize that his character was not being well received as the Wonder Kid. And until the first trading card set came out, like they took stills from the show, and there were trading cards of them, and there was one of that scene when he gets stabbed through the chest by like something that Q created, some kind of bestial thing, and the tag on the card was, Wesley gets the point, and it was only then that he realized that, oh, people don't like me. Yeah. But people like him now, for the most part, except for Ellen, when she's...
No, it's not that I don't like him. It's just that perhaps he doesn't have the most appealing voice.
I didn't even realize it was him until the end of the novel. I really enjoyed the voice. But then again, I also listen to audiobooks on double speed because I'm insane. So I would have a hard time even noticing no matter whose voice it was, because all voices on double speed kind of sound a bit alike. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Have you read it, Amanda?
Nope.
That was a very bad no.
I started reading it before we got into D&D, so I don't think that whole thing really resonated with me in the way that it probably would now.
I make people's lives miserable when they make me play Monopoly, so I really feel like I'm not meant for this
I love
world.
Monopoly.
Yes, I buy properties other people want.
But you see...
Me too! High five!
So that the game has to end sooner.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm a scorched earth Monopoly player. Like,
me
I take
too.
everyone out, and I don't care if I lose. I just want to make everyone miserable while they're playing, because I don't like playing Monopoly. Please leave me alone.
I'm a scorched earth everything.
I think that's your life.
Yeah. So, Ready Player One, for Amanda's benefit, so that's good. She is our protagonist character, who we have to explain stuff to. She's our point of view character in this manuscript of a podcast. Ready Player One is set up in a slightly future where basically the internet has grown ubiquitous and everyone accesses it through virtual reality helmets. So you can actually kind of experience it. So you would go to school from home, but say if you were in high school, and you would plug in your helmet and you would log into your school, and it would look to you as though you were at your school behind a desk, and like they have filters built in so that people can't say offensive things to each other and stuff like that. Like, it'll come up and mute bullies and stuff like that. Or you could, if someone was annoying you, you could just mute them permanently, kind of thing, and stuff like that. But it's basically the entire novel, except for a very, very small portion, takes place inside this virtual reality, where all of reality is a work and school and a game. Like, you can go to the school planet and go to high school, or if you have enough credits, you can buy a spaceship and go to planet World of Warcraft. And they have, like, a whole planet that's devoted to World of Warcraft where you can play it. And on the school planet, you can't attack other players because it's not a PvP zone. But
But that's also the socioeconomic part of it, is that
the credits are expensive.
The credits are expensive, so you log into school and that's fine, but if you are poor...
The school's free.
You can't get off that planet.
Yeah, and the person who coded this internet, which is called the Oasis, it grew from the internet. It started out as the Oasis was a program, and is now, by the time this novel takes place, that's all there is just the Oasis. Like, all of the internet takes place in the Oasis. So there'll be like a planet Wikipedia that you can go to, and it's just a bunch of encyclopedias, like that one episode of Doctor Who with the library. So it's full of 80s references, and it's explained by the person who coded the Oasis was a huge fan of 80s nostalgia, and so he would code in entire planets based on asteroids, or he would code in, and basically he coded in this secret game. Basically an Illuminati quest into the fabric of this internet, where there are clues and hints, and the novel picks up when the protagonist figures out one of the clues, and then it basically starts on a Holy Grail quest. But the quest isn't for the Holy Grail, it's for this random bit of code.
So, though, how do the people eat?
But, like, real food.
Yeah.
So, like, there still have to be people who are just doing normal things, not with helmets on.
Yes, but we never see those people.
I feel like that's the interesting story.
That would be an interesting story.
No, but I think
story. There should be a short story spun off from that, where it's just
that's
like the
all
main...
I'm interested in, is, like, who's the guy running the convenience store, where all of the people around him are just virtual reality freaks, and he's the only one who's, like, real.
No, do you know what I want to see? I want to see The Handmaid's Tale Ready Player One mashup about the handmaid that comes in and like sponge baths the protagonist while he's in his virtual reality thing.
Okay, but you're acting like you haven't read the book, because you know that doesn't happen. Anyway.
Yeah, no, he has a protein shake, like, and stuff like that. Like, basically, it's not... They only spend time with the people inside the Oasis, really. So it's hard to get a grasp on what the rest of this reality is like, because you're focusing on this. But I imagine there are some people not in it, but it's become very ubiquitous.
And, like, how did old people, what are they like in there? Because my nan still thinks the internet is, like, magic. So, like, what are the elderly people doing in this world?
I don't think everyone is. Because, remember, in it, he's got the neighbor who was very kind to him, and he goes and visits her sometimes. I don't think everyone is, as Matt's saying. It's mostly the younger generation, but then, like, the younger generation that's coming up, fat, lazy, can't get out of their house.
So it's like WALL-E.
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Like WALL-E.
It's like even more dystopian WALL-E.
Yeah, but if those characters that were fat and plugged in were the protagonists and did not need to be saved, it's that.
I don't know that that's a story I would read.
Exactly.
I loved it.
Exactly.
Market it that way.
Yeah. Oh, no, not if you market it that way.
I think the same reasons that I didn't like Ready Player One were the same reasons I didn't like Catcher in the Rye.
Okay, I didn't...
It's Catcher in the Rye with the internet. That's what it is.
Okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm out.
Are you so old you watch Saturday Night Live on Sunday morning?
Yes. But I watch it before I watch CNN, because CNN's Sunday morning shows spoil it. Like, they always show, like, the best clips. So, like, I watch Saturday Night Live, and then I watch the political shows.
With your coffee.
With my coffee.
I see.
Okay. So are we ready to talk about the writing segment now?
Yes.
All right. So, I was in charge of putting together the writing segment, and I put a lot of time and effort into organizing the writing segment this morning while I was watching Saturday Night Live and drinking coffee. So...
What kind of coffee?
Oh, Jumping Bean. For sure. It was Jumping Bean.
Okay.
Yeah. But the Keurig ones, because... Anyway, we're going to talk about writing now, Matt.
Okay.
We're in the middle of NaNoWriMo, so I thought it would be nice to talk about how you keep up your word count when life interferes. Like, so NaNoWriMo is a self-imposed deadline, but most of us work in an environment where we have a deadline or we have a project that we're working on, and I wondered how other writers keep their word count going despite, like, having to live a life working or whatever. So that was the first subject I was going to bring up in today's writing segment.
Well, the way I do it is I have a dry erase board next to me that I write the amount of words that I had done on the previous day on it. So it's constantly looking at me and reminding me that I have to write, and if I didn't do enough the day before, then, like, if there's a day when I only did like 1,000 words or 500 words or something like that, then for the whole rest of the next day, when I'm checking my email or doing whatever, that inadequacy is staring at me and reminding me that I need to do better and guilting me. The numbers are looking at me and I go, I gotta do better than that, and then I do better than that. It's weird. It's kind of like a French prison.
In what way?
Mm-hmm.
In that it's psychologically torturing. And also the food's bad
I'm
here.
still not quite there.
The food would be really good in a French prison. Like, they're good with... as, like, someone with French heritage, I don't understand the French prison concept.
Have you ever been in a French prison?
Have you?
No.
Well, I am French, at least.
I've read a biography from someone who was, though.
Okay, I don't think that's the same.
Okay.
As being there yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Were you there yourself?
No.
Oh, okay.
Alright. I feel like prison is just bad. I don't think you need to be specific about, nations.
Okay.
I don't keep my word count up. As you all know, I just try and bite out chunks when I can and fail the rest of the time. So I'm going to take tips from you guys.
Are you going to take tips from us? Because I've been trying to give you tips for, like, years.
No, I'm not going to take tips from you.
Okay.
I'm going to take tips from other people.
Okay. Amanda, how do you keep your word count up?
I'm actually finding the NaNoWriMo exercise very challenging. I think it's going to be good for me in the way that if I was to consistently go to the gym, I would find it challenging at first, and then I would just get used to constantly going to the gym. But I feel like forcing myself to turn out a high word count every day for the month of November will slowly make me, like, better going forward. At least until next November.
So what you're saying is the same reason I have trouble writing is why I have trouble going to the gym?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. I think it's discipline and, like, forcing yourself to
You
do
are really
something
bad at
consistently.
So I lack discipline and I can't do things consistently.
What I really like about NaNoWriMo, like what really I didn't realize about it before we started this, because you convinced me to start it this year.
Yeah, because I wanted friends.
Yeah, is that you have that little graph, that bar graph, where it tells you, I'll put it up on the screen, but where it tells you how many you should have done to finish on time and where you are.
Yes.
And I like it when I'm above the bar graph and stuff like that.
How nice for you.
Oh no, but like
I've never been above the bar graph.
No, but in general,
I've yet to be above the bar graph. Yes.
In general, like I like that it's a visual representation, and I can plug in how many numbers I've done, and it'll tell me based on like how many words you wrote a day. You write a day on average. You'll probably be done on, and it gives you the date kind of thing. I think mine's November 22nd right now, and I'm like,
and mine is 2018.
Yeah, 2018. Great. Awesome. But yeah, so it does that. I just wish, and maybe you can do this, but I kind of want to change, because my novel is going to be longer than 50,000 words. It's probably going to be 120,000 words by my estimation. So I really want to, can you change the total of it so that I can, like, because I want to just use this tool all year round, and screw NaNoWriMo, I don't care about the winning thing. I want to use this tool so that I can have a visual representation of my goal.
I feel like you could make an app, or maybe there is one, and someone will let us know what that is.
There's got to be an app.
There's got to be an app.
I feel like we should
that
just
does
check the
this.
App Store.
Yeah.
Yeah. If not, I could just use Excel, but that's lame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. You could use Excel. On this same sort of topic, what do you do if you lose inspiration? Like, what if you're hitting your goal, and then the inspiration's just gone for that project?
I usually just power through, because I've got a pretty... I plan out ahead of time, like each and every scene that I'm going to do. Sometimes I'll add a scene, but I'll very rarely take a scene away. So usually, if I'm having trouble, it's just a matter of getting through that scene, and then it's almost like when I'm done a scene and I cross that one off my little list, I get a little endorphin buzz from the act of completing something, and then that endorphin buzz gets me through that hump, let's say. Mm-hmm. And let's say that scene's not the best. Like, let's say that in forcing it through, it maybe wasn't on par with the rest of the material. That's fine. That's something that can be done in a second draft or editing or something like that. But basically just powering through. I know that's not great advice, because that doesn't really tell you anything, but yeah, that's what I do, is I just power through and force it, basically.
There are a couple apps, actually.
To count words?
To count words, but also to help your writing productivity in general. So you can get novel word count by productivity here on the Apple App Store. That one's $1.39 and it looks pretty basic. There's no nice graphics with that one. But if you're willing to shell out $6.99, Ink on Track Your Writing has a really nice, slick looking one.
They are not paying us to say this.
That also incorporates
no one's paying us
writing
to say anything.
sprints, which I know we were talking about last NaNoWriMo meeting that we had.
Yeah, the last time we met in person, we were contemplating writing
I still don't understand the concept of of a word sprint. Can you explain that to me?
I'm not an expert, but my best understanding of it is you have a period of time, and it's usually done in either a physical group or online. Like you can do it on Twitter. There's a NaNoWriMo hashtag that you can follow and get and participate in a word sprint, but it's how many words can you write in a certain, like in 5 minutes or in 10 minutes. So the only purpose of it is...
So it's like, if there's a novelist like me, you're trying to write novels constantly, and then NaNoWriMo is like condensing that effort into a month, and then a word sprint is even further. It's condensing that effort down into like an hour or 5 minutes.
Well, I think it kind of takes on the same principle that it does when they say, like, you should study in little intervals, like do it for 10 minutes, take a break for 5 minutes, do it for 10 minutes, take a break for 5 minutes again, sort of thing. So I think the idea behind the sprint is to do it that way, to just push yourself as fast as you can and then take a break and push yourself as fast as you can again, so you don't have those times where you're just sitting there staring at your monitor deciding what you want to be writing. Yeah,
it reminds me of when I was trying to get in shape before I absolutely gave up trying to get into shape. I was going jogging with a guy who went on to be in the military, but he showed me how to do what he called it light polling, where like if you're going for a jog on the side of the road or something like that, you walk normally from one light pole to the second light pole, and then you run as fast as you can from that light pole to the third light pole, and then walk casually again and just do it in little sprints like that, so that you get that burst of energy and get your heart rate up and get your, burn calories, but you still don't get exhausted like you would if you were just going all out kind of thing. So it's high exertion, rest, heart attack.
I think, too, it's really useful if you're not used to writing a massive amount each day. And massive could be, it's subjective, but, I'm not used to writing 1,600 words a day, and that's kind of where you're encouraged for NaNoWriMo. Unless I'm on a deadline where I have to have something done, but, just every day throughout the month of November. So the word sprint kind of is a way to get your word count up in short bursts, because you can get a couple of hundred words out every time you do a word sprint. Well, that adds to your... And it kind of trains you to write faster so that you don't have to carve out 3 or 4 hours every single day to hit your word count if you can write quickly.
It also trains you to focus in small bursts.
So what do you guys hit for word counts a day typically, like on a typical day?
My goal is always to try and hit 500, and then usually I'll go over. But it's
because I like the feeling of going over more than the feel of underachieving. So I've been at 500 for a few months where I've been working a lot.
Yeah.
But you're right. I found that I can do 1,000 even when I'm working a lot, but that if I set it at 1,000 and I only get 600, I feel down.
Yep.
But if I set it at 500 and, accidentally go over and do 800, I feel great about myself, and that's much more of a motivation to keep going.
So my sister's a dancer, and one of the things she does, because she has to practice at the studio and has to force herself to practice, and the idea of getting up and practicing is really stressful. So one of the things she does is she tells herself all she has to do is go to the studio. She just has to go there. And when she gets there, she never doesn't practice. So for me, it's just you sit down and you do a couple of hundred words, and that's all I have to do. I have to just open my computer, not go on Facebook, and write a couple of hundred words. And then I can take a break, but I never just write
a few
hundred.
Some people the ability to trick their own mind, as if their own mind doesn't know what the other part of their brain is thinking. Like the way you would trick a small child or a dog to go to the vet or something.
I can't do that. The only time I hit like a really good word count is when I've plotted out everything ahead of time. If I sit there and I don't know what I'm writing, it eventually all just goes to hell.
I think the moral of this is that my sister and I have the ability to trick ourselves as though we're still children.
Your sister, you may have very complex brain. Like, you may have two separate consciousnesses in your own brains. Each.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do find if you're able to do that, though, if you can just tell yourself that you just need to do this much, that you can convince yourself to do.
Have you ever considered that, like, maybe there was a second sister, but you absorbed it in the womb, and that's where those thoughts come from?
Will be three. A third.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, second to you,
yeah, I mean, yeah,
second to her.
we've contemplated it, but I think apparently that's not normal to contemplate. Yeah.
Explain this?
I feel like this is outside the sub. Maybe that's more for like a general conversation.
If you would like to know more about Amanda's second sister theory, please comment below, and we will discuss it another time.
So I wanted to talk to you guys, and this was for an interview originally that I put up on nqonline.ca, and that's about the publishing community in Newfoundland. It's a lot different from publishing communities in other provinces, especially in larger cities.
Do we know that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
It really is.
Wait, do you mean the traditional publishing community, or our small publishing community that we know?
I know both.
Okay.
Yeah. Traditional for sure, I know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But also in terms of the way our small press works, we're very tight. I think a lot of the small press here has kind of formed a really great community. So we had a couple small press people talking about this with us. So we were talking with Scott Bartlett, Christopher Walsh, Kenneth Tam, Heather Riley. Amanda, you were there as well when we were talking about this.
I was there.
And Matt, you were there, yeah.
You were there.
Yeah, I was there.
Mel Collins.
Mel Collins was there too,
Get a chance to use her file photo again.
You just love to torture her.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys were all kind of talking about how the publishing community has changed since we first got involved. And it was something that I was very interested in because I kind of came into the publishing community not really knowing what to expect and just kind of going in very gung-ho. For anyone who doesn't know the story, I rolled up to Sci-Fi and the Rock 2 with my manuscript printed out and just passed it off to Matt. You know, not the typical way that you end up eventually working for a publishing company.
Or owning one.
Or owning one, yeah.
I feel like that's what you tell people not to do.
Oh, it's 100% what I tell people not to do now, but it's 100%
like
what worked for me.
But I feel like that's how we got all our best team members. Ellen just bounced up to me at a convention, and then a year later was like a full 50-50 partner. I just walked up to Erin Vance in class and was like, "You look like you could use some money," and now she's our editor-in-chief.
Not sketchy at all.
Amanda came up to us at a convention and was like, my publisher just went out of business. And I said,
no, that's not what happened. What
What
happened was I said, I have to go now. I have to do a seminar. And you said, on what? And I said, on writing young adult fantasy. And you said, oh, do you do that? I said, yes. And that's when I told you. I didn't just come up to you and be like, you know, are you my publisher? Like,
Gotcha.
But also,
like a kid's book.
What you said, Matt, was, oh, you should come back and talk to Ellen.
Yes.
Because he's not willing to admit it right now, but he knew then that he was a bit out of his depth.
Yeah, depth.
Yeah, depth.
Not depth.
Depth.
I'm going to go. When you listen to
You know
this,
what?
you'll realize that the first time you said it is though like she was out of her Johnny Depp.
You know what? She was also out of a Johnny Depp.
I don't like Johnny Depp.
I don't really either.
He's not my fave.
Not your fave?
No.
Pirates?
Yeah, he's got some questionable life skills, though. You were saying how different it was, and I wanted you to share a little bit more of it here, because when all of us are inside of it, we don't really see it as being strange. It's like our own little family, or like our little publishing family here. And I think that's a foreign concept for people who are really ingrained with traditional publishing.
So, from a traditional perspective,
Yes.
the difference between Newfoundland publishing in the traditional sense and then in the versus the rest of Canada is people are really jealous of our community, even the traditional community, because Newfoundlanders will buy Newfoundland books.
Yes.
And so traditional publishers in Newfoundland can fully fund themselves just by printing Newfoundland books.
Yes.
And then from the traditional sense, the big difference I noticed from working with another publisher and then coming and working with like a really genre-based publisher was just the focus on like community. Whether I think sometimes it's hard in traditional publishing to get a hold of your editor or your publisher, like even if you work with them or work for them, whereas I think in the indie community you have a community whether they're part of your publishing world or not. So
yeah, like you can send me an email and you can get a response back within a minute and a half.
So I think like this community, like this interview, the thing that was really interesting about that is that most of us were not all part of the same. Like we either worked for different publishers, or we self-published, or we had like just different backgrounds with publishing, or we had like it was different groups. So I think that's really different as well.
And we all work very well together, which is different. There's very much with our crew and with indie in general. I find I've had some conversations with people from away that's very much an indie proud. Like it's not like traditional publishers where you're competing for the same market. You're helping each other find the same market or each other's market, or sharing tips and sharing strategies and promoting each other's work and all types of stuff.
Do you guys think that that's as much a part of just being a part of genre fiction though? Because people who read genre want to read more, so you know if they like something that Engine put out, then they're just voracious readers. So then Engine's not in competition with like a Scott Bartlett, because if you're reading, you're reading.
That's true, but also there's the fact that genre is a huge pie, like where that's divided up into hundreds of different smaller subgenres. So you would have to be in competition with another one of the genre publishers. You'd almost have to be going for that exact demographic. Like Ken Tam does a lot of military sci-fi and a lot of historical fiction sci-fi. Two genres that, while I sometimes read them, I wouldn't be able to wrap my head around writing.
Okay, but so Ken Tam and Scott Bartlett are both writing in military sci-fi to a degree now, and Chris Walsh and Heather Riley are both writing fantasy.
Different age, different look, going for different demographics. Though.
Fair. Slightly different demographics.
Yeah.
But we all work very well together. And I think the thing that's unique there is that it's almost out of necessity here. There is no big name here in Newfoundland.
No.
That really rivals a big name, say, out of Toronto or out of New York.
No. The biggest name in writing, and I won't name who we're thinking of here, but the biggest name locally here in Newfoundland that you can think of, if you go one province over, they've never even heard of that person.
That's fair. I don't think entirely true, but it's
pretty true.
It's a fair opinion. But my point being though is that you've got a group here that are willing to help each other because they have to. Whereas if you were going anywhere else in the country or in the continent, really, you would be up against so many big names that you would just be drowned out.
I don't know if that's totally the case. To me that's like we're talking about the publishing community in other places where we haven't lived. It's kind of like we're on the inside looking out and making assumptions that might not be accurate. We're not there.
Maybe, but I do think that Newfoundland in general is always, we're always slightly different than what everyone else is. And maybe part of that is the type of community that it is. I think probably you would find communities of indie writers banding together, even in like a Toronto or a Vancouver, but not necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily have really advanced people in the industry working with people who are just like literally like just trying to put their foot in the door. And I think that might be what's unique about here.
I have to wonder, I have never been shy about the fact that our unique literary identity in Newfoundland is in some way detrimental to people who try to step outside of that identity. Like, the Newfoundland story, air quotes, is so ingrained, like that sort of, like, fishing community narrative is so ingrained into what a story that comes from here is supposed to be, that when you step outside of that, it's hard, and it's hard to get support from the networks that support the traditionally published here. It's a horrible word to say, but it's very incestuous, and it's self-replicating, and like I find that they get the people in the traditional publishers in locally, like they have learned how to market Newfoundland stories to exclusively Newfoundland readers.
Right.
They don't know how to market genre fiction, and as a result, when they try to do it, it doesn't sell well because they don't know how to market it. And then they say to themselves, oh, genre fiction written by Newfoundlanders just doesn't sell, when it's like, well, that's not the case. You're just bad at your job. Like, you're...
I think it's too, though, that maybe this is the difference. Like, maybe that's the crux of the difference between Newfoundland community and indie community and other communities of writers. In Toronto, there isn't a Toronto story.
See, that's what I wonder.
And in Newfoundland, like, where we... And maybe you would find this in other... Like, maybe you find it in the Maritimes, maybe?
That's what I want. Like, if people are listening, comment. Like, if you're in a different city or a different place and there are, like... these small local publishers that only publish stuff with people, like if there's an Ontario publisher that exclusively publishes from people based out of Ontario, and it has to be based in Ontario and reflect traditional Ontario values, then let me know, because it seems like a thing that's unique to our island, but maybe I'm wrong, and I'm just speaking from it's what I've seen, so I think it's unique to me, but maybe it's not.
I have heard people in other parts of Canada say that they envy the way that a Newfoundland book or Newfoundland publisher can print a book in Newfoundland and promote that book in Newfoundland, and the publisher can completely make all of their money off of that. They don't have to go outside of Newfoundland. In some ways, Newfoundlanders wanting to read so much Newfoundland culture is something that other places in Canada envy a little bit. But as an indie writer, it can hold you back if you're not telling that story.
But I don't think it's authentic Newfoundland culture that's being necessarily written about now. Like, Random Passage is not our now.
They've got Newfoundland culture kept in a bubble that's around 1950. I wasn't there, but I want to say it's 1950.
Or if they are willing to go past 1950, it's like it's not that
it's
every
beatnik
man
70s Newfoundland.
Yeah,
it's set today, but beatnik 70s Newfoundland.
And I hate to say that, because there is some really good contemporary writing coming out of the province too. But that's some shade you are throwing.
Name some.
There is. No.
Oh.
But that's, we don't want to name names, because then if somebody's not named, they'll think that they're not good. I wouldn't name names.
It's a bit of sass coming from you.
Yeah.
I think you might have a chip on your shoulder.
Ooh, maybe.
Just a titch. It's gotten a bit uncomfortable.
No, it's not.
I think that even the most contemporary stuff that's coming out of Newfoundland right now isn't exactly representative of the current Newfoundland scene. I think it's all a little bit insulated by what people are experiencing in small niches. Not necessarily the modern Newfoundland lifestyle, which it's not as foreign, I think, to a lot of places as people make it out to be.
That's true, and I mean, the most modern and new story to come out of Newfoundland and be popular that I can think of from this past year is, it's not a novel, but it's Come From Away. But even that's set around 9/11, so I mean, even then, we're talking about a modern Newfoundland story, and it is, and it's new to us, it's newly written, it's newly produced, but it's set 17 years ago, so that's very close to 20 years ago, and that's the most, and it's wonderful, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to throw shade at Come From Away, but the fact that the most modern story I can think of that's actually set in Newfoundland is set 20 years ago is a bit...
I think maybe that's the thing you can think of that's popular outside the Newfoundland bubble.
That's fair.
Because people within Newfoundland would argue that there's, every year at the book awards, there's great books coming out, but they're not necessarily always being picked up outside of certain Canadian markets or certain Newfoundland markets. So it's, I think, because Newfoundland has traditionally been so good at supporting those sorts of stories that the traditional publishers really get behind, they don't necessarily need to Come From Away. They don't need to hit it out of the park, because they can make their living off of selling just throughout Newfoundland.
That's fair, but then you have problems like you, when you came from a different publisher with
problem.
When you came with Call of the Sea, you approached some other publishers, and they had told you that the sales were done for it because they know how to sell exclusively to Newfoundland, and so the fact that we have a ravenous market is good because you can count on those 10,000 books to sell. But once they're sold, they don't know how to keep going past that. So it's like they're not. It's almost like they're publishing magazines in book form. You know what I mean? Where it's like, by which I mean like I don't mean in terms of quality. I mean in terms of like a magazine has a May 2017 date on it, and then after a certain date, there's
Single
no point.
print run, basically.
Yes, exactly.
There wasn't that understanding of serialization. Which you've done a lot of. So if you write more books in a series, then that first book in the series becomes interesting and new again to a demographic that wants a series. So it's like you've done another run.
And I feel like, with rare exception, because I will admit that there are exceptions, no one's figured out yet how to write a story based in Newfoundland, written by a Newfoundlander, that is both interesting and accessible to Newfoundlanders and the entire world at large. Because like almost any other place in the world I can think of that can be done. Like the Kite Runner is a great example of a novel that's based in a foreign country, and written by someone from that foreign country, and yet has wide appeal. There are way too many novels to name that are based in New York but are read by people the world over, or Chicago and are read the world over, Toronto read by people the world over. But we seem to have cracked how to speak to our own people but not to a wider audience. And I wonder if it's a thing of like, we're used to Newfoundland, so there's things that when we're setting up a setting that we don't have to explain, that I don't have to explain to you because you're a Newfoundland reader and you just get these things, but to someone else reading it, it'd be like reading about a different world, you know? Like, it has to be explained and it's not being. I don't know what the trick is.
I mean, I think that's why everyone got behind Come From Away.
Yeah.
It's because it seems to have... But, again, you could argue that that's because that story is inherently tied up in something that happened in New York.
And to the
and
world.
Worldwide.
In a large,
Right.
like a world event.
And maybe that is something that Newfoundland could learn from, is that if you want to make a story resonate outside of Newfoundland, that takes something unique about Newfoundland and really look at a broader theme and how it plays into a broader theme.
That's true.
I think Shetland did it very well, actually. It's a show set in the Shetland Isles about a police officer investigating crime in a small island community. And in some ways it was very accessible for me as a Newfoundlander because it had so many of the hallmarks that are hallmarks of Newfoundland stories. But it was also very unique and very representative of that culture. And I think it was accessible to a wider audience in a way that we should be making our storytelling accessible, in that it was serious. It did have its lighthearted moments, but it was focused on the stories that it was telling about characters and community. And I think those are stories that are universal enough, but for Newfoundlanders, they can be very unique stories.
Well, we've reached the end of the episode when we talk about our sponsors. This episode was sponsored by FictionFirst Bookstore, a bookstore that specializes in science fiction and fantasy books. They are located at 1506 Meghan Drive, and they ship worldwide. Their contact information is available below, and they have a wide assortment of titles. But today specifically, we want to draw attention to a beautiful signed edition of Ursula K LeGuin's 2001 book, Tales from the Earthsea, which at the time of this recording can be yours for only $60. We'd like to thank Fiction First for being a sponsor, and to encourage our audience to check with them for all their used book needs. That's it for the Write Project podcast this week. Tune in soon, and never look back.